this thing. And we're live. All right. Welcome, everybody, back to SpiritSide Chats. What a wonderful day it is. It seems like every time we do, every time there's a full moon and a new moon and we do a SpiritSide Chat, there's always some other thing happening, whether it's another celestial alignment or something else happening in the world, like that hurricane or whatever, an eclipse or something. This time, there's probably some more that I know of, or that you guys know about. I know that this is like the beginning of Canadian Thanksgiving, so it's a little bit more earthy or human consciousness than like celestial, but like still bears some significance, and sort of the at least what people are trying to create with it is togetherness, even if it came from something that was a little bit intense and crazy. But yeah, welcome back to SpiritSide Chats. How's everybody doing today? Everyone's muted. Yeah, you can unmute yourself. You say some things. Don't make me the only one.
Yeah, doing good, man. Doing good.
Good. Same. Doing pretty good.
Mowing the lawn, so I'll mute myself in a bit.
Sorry, what was that, Anthony?
I'm going to be finishing mowing the lawn.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, do your thing. I'm glad you could jump on even amidst, having to do some yard work. Yeah, so the theme for today is on the changing of seasons and all that really comes along with that. As the Earth itself is moving into a new state of being, predominantly a colder one, at least on this hemisphere, that also reflects within us. And we also go through these cycles of being more outwardly expansive, during the summer months, and then inwardly contractive and kind of like bundling up, like the harvest of data this year, and taking all of that and bringing it down into a seed, a seed to be planted to like go dormant over the winter months and then expand out again. So yeah, we're going to talk about that. But before we begin, I guess we should probably do an opening meditation. Would anybody like to lead it? Any volunteers? Eddie's pointing at me, I think. He's nodding. Cool. Okay, yeah. Also, for people watching, Dria's here on the live chat, so if you have questions or comments, you can message her. But we're going to do a little meditation here.
Can Dria do an opening meditation? I haven't heard the feminine side of this yet. Is this a thing, or come on, Dria, step up to the plate?
That would be awesome.
I like on chat and then do a bunch of like social media stuff as well.
She's like running SpiritSide social media at the moment, it seems.
But I'll meditate. Like I won't just work through the meditation, but I want to lead it.
Okay, but noted, we'll come back maybe like next time or sometime. We've got to get you doing leading a meditation. That would be great. Eddie really wants to see you do it too. Okay, everyone. Yeah, let's do it. Start by taking a deep breath. And as you breathe, connect with your body. Feel the different layers and aspects of your body, where there's tension, where there's excitement. And breathe into those spaces to bring them all into balance with each other. With each breath, finding that equilibrium in the middle between excitement, joy, and the resolution of problems that you may be experiencing within your body. And in this state, be aware that all of the feelings of what's in your body is a reflection of your emotional, mental, and spiritual states of being. By resolving those challenges emotionally, mentally, spiritually, the physical automatically works itself out by default. And this is what we are to embody now as we breathe. This deeper connection to the causal forces rather than the reflection and the effects of those causes. And as we're observing our breath, in our minds and our hearts, we can observe that this physical world is but a mirror. Something that we can use to reflect upon and gain deeper insights into who we really are by the results that we garner. And now as you breathe, send that awareness down deep into the earth, the heart of all connected people, the heart of all connected things in this realm. Because the earth herself is also just a reflection of a much greater consciousness. And on higher levels, there is a bright light at the center of this earth, which touches you, which is a part of you, which flows through you. And so with the sun as well, above our heads. But a reflection of an even brighter light. Now breathe into this shared awareness between that which is above, that which is below, and you right in the middle. And you are the crescendo of those two forces meeting and radiating love out to the world. The accumulation of the Divine Mother and the Divine Father. And in this you are holy. And in this you are loved. You are one with these forces, and they are one with you. The union is in your heart. It is through here that we can touch everyone. Take a few more deep breaths. And now begin to bring yourself back. And when you're ready, with an open heart and a shining smile, open your eyes. And then
Better be smiling.
go with the flow. She's like, you better be smiling. I don't know if you heard it in the background. Whoa, careful. Anyways, how was that?
Thank you, Jordan.
It's a pleasure.
Blissful as usual, my friend. That's why I
Yay.
pointed at you. It is a lovely experience to go through your meditations.
Thank you. I just, honestly, they just kind of come out. There's no plan there. But yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was fun.
Where's Aaron?
I hope so.
Spirit Studios. He's sleeping.
Yeah, Aaron is. I think he was. So Aaron was up late working on the card directory because you know how like the last several chats we've been like the tarot cards. We're gonna launch the directory. We're really close to like having them all published on the site. And last night Aaron was like, "Look, I may or may not be able to be on the call because I'm gonna stay up until this is done." And I can't say it's completely done because like all of the individual pages for the cards haven't been built, but you can see, well, I'll send maybe a little, like I'll post it on Patreon or something, but you can actually see the full card directory and like look at every card and kind of roll over them for a little bit of information on each card. It looks really cool actually, but yeah, no, it's not publicly launched yet, so he was probably up really late and is probably taking a little bit of extra time this morning to sleep in. Yeah. So here we are. I want to hear from you guys now a little bit. I've been talking this whole time. How was your day? How is your fall weather? Are the leaves starting to change?
Yes, they are here.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is. Almost as beautiful as those beautiful colors you guys' hair have changed. I'm loving the blue and the red.
I was going to say that too. It's pretty good change, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. We watched like way too much anime, I think. Not actually, but yeah.
One of my favorite things about fall here in Ontario is if you go just north of the city of Toronto to one of the national parks called Algonquin Park, it at this time of year the leaves are all, because they're all maple trees, and it just turns into this wondrous display of all these crimsons and like magentas and all these beautiful colors that just start to represent so much of that grounding energy, the browns and the yellows and all these things. So it just looks like this wonderful cascade of colorful bliss that just flows everywhere. So it's speaking of changes, that's one of my favorite changes in this area of the world for sure.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I went to Asheville in North Carolina, and actually and New Jersey, I remember seeing this too. Just like, yeah, like that. There's such a diverse array of colors all at once when you're up in the mountains and you look over and you just see this, like, it's just magnificent. We actually, over here, it's mostly just yellow, and I can even turn it around and show you like it's still really green, you know, it's a really nice day today. But it's, I mean, as I'm seeing some leaves starting to fall already, and they're just, yeah, just like mostly yellow. It's really nice though. I always thought it was interesting too about like the color spectrum of, you know, like that kind of like when they kind of the rising of like red to green and green to red all the way up and down there, and it doesn't really usually get into the blues and the violets except with like the flowers and the budding and like those different, you know, like correlated to the chakras or whatever, like that higher consciousness of like the plant manifests in the flower, where the leaves kind of hold the lower energies of the spectrum, which is kind of cool. But yeah, no, I mean, as far as like earth changes goes, I mean, you know, the last we kind of talked about before this, we had these huge kind of celestial events and everything, eclipses and hurricanes and what have you, that kind of all like built up. And now, well, I mean, it's still happening. We had this crazy event happen in Las Vegas just, you know, in this past week, and it's almost like there's like on one side it's like a calming down, and on another side it's still like a building up, depending on, you know, how we're looking at things. It's very interesting, the state of the world right now. I would like to maybe open that up too. If does anybody have any like any perspectives or anything that they would like to share and bring to the table about this phenomenon? And
there was actually a woman before the shooting. He said Oh, why is it echo? All right, sorry. 45 minutes before the shooting, there was this woman that was saying, "You guys are all gonna die," and then they didn't take her seriously, and then she got escorted out by security. And 45 minutes after that, the shooting happened, and the video is actually on YouTube if you want to watch it. So that's pretty crazy. Like, I don't know.
It's very. Oh, please.
That does sound pretty mad. I mean, I definitely don't even kind of doubt anything like that anymore, because you've got people who are so in tune, and people who've been so in tune with things for so long that, you know, I mean, and take a look at some of the people that we lock up away in crazy houses. You know, what are they actually in touch with that we don't realize? So it doesn't surprise me that there's someone who's come along and sensed that before it happens.
Exactly.
There's probably also a lot of information that's just not making it out to the public. You know, like this person could have been very aware because they had even seen or heard or known about some plan or plot ahead of time or something like that. I mean, there's even been discussions on, what was it, collective evolution that published it? That was sort of about
well, there's multiple shooters.
Sort of, yeah, this you know, it's the same thing with anytime there's an assassination of a president or a holy person or whatever, you know, there's always this one story of this person did it and that's the public story. But then when you start digging, there's all these other little bits of information. And I don't mean to get into conspiracy theory sort of stuff, but even it's like the 9/11 thing. How come this one building fell but no plane hit it? You know, it's like that kind of thing. That's there's more information that's not making it out to the public, and then, you know, it's really up to every individual to really do their own investigation. And then really it also comes back of what we talked about in one of the previous calls, which is how much attention and energy do we want to give to it? And in some cases, really, the truth needs to be shared and known and discussed, and from that capacity it is important. But again, it's up to each individual to really do that investigation, to find, and to send the waves of love that are necessary, to what's right to come through them, and not kind of get stuck on any one particular, because it's so easy to just go, oh, well, that person's evil and that, you know, that's that, and write it off and just, you know, tune it out in your mind and whatnot. But it's kind of strange just because the amount of information that's available in the world, you know, we really have to be able to focus and discern what truth is, and check within our hearts about what's right in any particular moment.
Yeah, totally agree. Jen, just wanted to go back actually, when everything, the original thing you were talking about was kind of all these planetary shifts, changes in human behavior and things like that, and we kind of got into a conspiracy theory. So if we to say something about that, to bring it back, I think we've been seeing a load of planetary changes, especially here on Earth, for a long time, and that's come in a spiritual awakening for a lot of people. And so we've kind of had that burst of goodness of the fruit come forwards, and now I guess we're seeing some of the the shifts from the core of our being, and seeing how they are, the kind of the negative backlash of things that we've been doing as a species. So the Earth churns those out in forms of volcanoes, earthquakes, tidal waves, monsoons and such. So maybe we're just going through a period of darkness, a bit of the bad stuff, and which is reflected by the moon cycles. And we just had all this sort of dark energy, or just chaotic sort of riled up energy coming through, and now it's beginning to settle. So we're seeing that in ourselves. Maybe we'll see it in the planet in the months to come as well.
Mm-hmm. It's very cyclical too, isn't it? Right? I mean, just on the changing of seasons. This is a cycle that we hit every several months.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And then you can look at sort of the more galactic or cosmic cycles of the awakening and falling of human consciousness over thousands of years, and from the Human History movie, the 13,000 year cycles, or the precession of the equinox and what have you. And so there's like that crescendo of like all of them sort of happening at once. But in this particular one, we're like observing and looking at like a very small one of just, like going into winter almost thing, but yeah, it is sort of that like condensing. And in that condensing, it's like the kind of like what you were just saying, Anthony, is like we're seeing more accurately the reflection of what is really in the human heart. And you can see that there's a lot of anger and rage and frustration, that this is some of the ways that it's manifesting. And like to just focus on just the, this particular Las Vegas thing actually is still limiting in the grand scheme of things, because you look at what's happening in the world and in so many different ways, and there's so many little injustices that happen every day that we have to acknowledge and see it, because we experience them, right? Like people individually go through and have these experiences, but when they do, they have a choice of whether they want to cast blame on someone else out of them and do that whole thing, or go within and say, why am I seeing this? Why am I experiencing this? What is the lesson or the thought in the mind of God behind this event happening or this thing happening? And what can I learn from it? How can I grow? And I feel like this sort of like in that sort of this transitionary phase, we get to, it's just more opportunities for that, right? And like, because every day is an opportunity for what change am I grounding? What's happening? What am I bringing to the table? What am I learning? And what am I bringing into the new cycle? Because this is the blending of like the almost like cascading out of this year. So it's almost like, what have you done this year? How are you taking that learning, that accumulative learning, and bringing it forward into the next year? Like, what is the package that you're making for the accumulation of this year? And what is the seed going to grow next year?
I actually like that you speak on that, Jordan, because it's, putting this into more of a principled perspective, like the principle of one's purpose in our life that's living through us is the ability for us to sort of breathe what you're talking about, being able to get to a place where we can look at those changes because we've actually adapted ourselves to what we're here to do, or just simply here to be, depending on your frame of consciousness. Those of us that are still, say, working and offering services in the world, we do have very direct, if we look into the genesis of why we're doing what we're doing, these are seeds planted in the hearts of ourselves, of our families, oftentimes, of our communities, of our nations, of the world, of the greater cosmos, and we filter that reality down through our particular actions. It could be something as simple as reaching out and offering love to a flower, to ruling a nation, whatever that might be, whatever that purpose is. When you talk about packaging up basically this reflective nature, you're reflecting upon the historical context of your action, of your ideation, of your belief structure, all these things, and then looking to see how are those manifesting. What would I like to have happen in the next segment of my experience, and of all of our experiences, because if I act on something, well, that impacts in a Cascadian type of fashion everything in my reality and in your reality and in everybody else's reality, akin to sort of like a butterfly effect in a way. So I love that you mentioned that, because at the broadest sense of seasonal change is just change in and of itself, and what are we doing to carry the seasonal aspect of that change? Because if, let's just say, for instance, we use the Thanksgiving type of period. I just realized actually other places in the world don't even have Thanksgiving. Naive moment, but it's one of those things that.
I'm sorry, you might be back. Your audio kind of cut out for a minute, and I couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I just naively realized that there isn't Thanksgiving in some other nations. I was like, oh, interesting. But if this fall period, this period of gathering, of reaping what we sow, is what we focus on as our reference point for the context of our next motions, then it's really all about thanksgiving, giving thanks, giving that gratitude, being able to come to a place where we're actually musing on why it's so beautiful to receive, because we've given, because we've planted, because we've associated ourselves with this growth cycle. So to think about, you know, after this gathering of beauty that we've watched go through this wonderful cycle of a season from seed to fruition, to watch that and then to gather that and then to give thanks upon that, that's a profound experience for anybody who's tapped into their heart. And I do it on a daily basis, but from a seasonal perspective, it's even more powerful, because now we're seeing our ecosystems change as well. We're seeing them flux into this, as you mentioned, a state of rest, especially in these northern sort of areas of the world where we have these seasonal differentiations that are so regimented. We can tell, like, I mean, there's literally snow and no life on our trees, you know, whereas maybe in some of the southern nations or southern areas of the world around the equatorial frequencies, like there's clearly not as much of a differentiation, and it's just all either rain or sun, which is cool, or maybe lack thereof, pun intended. So, you know, when it comes to being able to really appreciate those changes, I love that you're asking people to frame, okay, so what have you done? What are you packing away? What are you storing? What are you jarring? What are you putting away for later? What are you referencing for a later time? And then how are you going to use that? In the world of gardening, I grab tomatoes, I can them, and I use them for spaghetti sauce through the winter. What are you doing with the canned tomatoes of your metaphorical life, of the one that is that one where you've cultivated that love, and you're now seeing, say, a wonderful person come into your world, or you're seeing this wonderful opportunity start to blossom in your life, or you see this wonderful aspect of an idea that you've been working on for so long that's finally come to fruition. What are you using that canned thing? What are you going to add that to? What kind of meal are you going to serve yourself, your family, and the world with that? So I love that you ask about that. So that's that seasonal reference, and I like how you kind of frame that. So yeah, that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you. That was awesome. That was very well said. It made me think of two things, actually, when you're just talking about kind of like what you're radiating out and giving to the world. You know, and also kind of a little bit of a bridge too for in like the, you know, a lot of people might look at some of the state of the world and some of the struggles that we're having and go like, well, why, you know, is being loving really going to make a difference or anything like that? And it's like, yes, because if you're like radiating out love, you might just so happen to, you know, walk down the street and see someone who's like struggling and help them, love them, and give them some support, and like that love could be the catalyst for them to go and do something great as opposed to doing something harmful, you know, because they were touched, because you came from right here. And the second thought was just sort of in answering the question, at least for me, like what I'm like packing away, is, you know, as you know, is like these cards. And I'm just like wanting to like bring some focus again, like to, I'm really excited because it's almost like a new opening, in that, like, for me, it's a packing away of a seed that I've been working on, and we've all been working on here for so long. But then in the packing away of that, now it gets to grow into the minds of everybody. And I did some meditations earlier this week, and it was like I had this wonderful experience of sort of like all of our minds sort of becoming a lot more connected by the symbolism and the imagery and the consciousness and the energy of these things. So I'm really excited to share that with you. I don't know why I just talked about that, but either way, it's cool. But yeah, let's open it up, like, because we haven't really heard from Karen, from Philip. Like, what are you guys packing away, you know, for the accumulation of making a seed this year?
I could probably think I could talk for like an hour. But I wanted to ask before I mentioned anything, does the tarot book include spreads, like tarot spreads?
It does. Yes, we have. There's 5 specific spreads that and like a description of how to do each one, but it's very simply like a 1, 2, 3, 5, and then the Celtic cross. But the Book of Patch might have some more because there's a specific spread in Crowley's Thoth booklet that is pretty cool, actually. I like it. So I might kind of copy that one over as well.
Okay. I was going to say, but I've been specifically trying to stay in the present moment and just be more aware, to grow my awareness. And I think since I've been doing that, I've been more in the present moment. I've been doing more. So it goes back to like planting your seeds and like taking care of them. And I've been doing more on a day-to-day basis. And I think in looking back, I am doing that like consciously and subconsciously. And I am so grateful. I just recently showed my short film to a couple of loving people that I love, and I got great feedback. It's like 95% done, and I'm so excited because it has been 2 years coming, 2 years of of planting and feeding and watering, and finally to see all this creative, grateful energy coming this October. I'm just like, just enjoying it. I'm just like, yay.
That's so wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. I will, I'm actually gonna upload the script to, because I sent it to Nicholas. I'm gonna upload the script to Slack so you guys can read it. And then when I publish it, you guys can see the difference of how it came to life.
It would be an honor. Cool.
That's exciting.
So can I go ahead and add to what we were talking about with like the metaphor of like seed planting and how, you know, you plant your seeds in the spring and you harvest in the winter, that kind of idea?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I really like that idea. But what I was actually thinking about this morning in relation to seasons was like fire, basically, and how like heat is like the root of what actually causes those seeds to sprout and everything. And our seasons are really
talking about season sprouts. I have a sprouting chart right here.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah. All right.
Very cool. Yeah, this morning I was just thinking about how like in the spring we have warmth, and in the winter we have like a lack of warmth, and that could be like metaphorically like we have like life and love and goodness, and then there's another season where we have like, you know, lies and sorrow and all that other stuff. And so for me, like what I'm packaging in the spring and bringing into the winter is fire. You basically, you know, makes me think of like the legend of the Phoenix. That could be like a metaphor for the seasons. Like a phoenix will die, right? Die supposedly, and really it's just like a pile of ashes. But then inside those ashes, there's embers, right? And there's still life within the ashes. And for me, it makes me think of like in winter, it's like, you know, there's this desolate, terrible place, you know, lies and destruction and hatred and all this stuff. But then if you look around, you'll actually find like a lot of people who are still carrying like embers in their hearts. And yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking about this morning, is I'm bringing like fire into dark, you know, light to the dark. So
Wonderfully well said.
Really good analogy, Philip. Yeah, well done.
for sure.
There's two things that I wanted to respond with to that, because when you were just talking about like the warmth is what makes the plants rise, I just saw it in a different way than I'd ever had before, which is like, you know, like with the tree, well, actually taking it outside of that first, like water evaporation, by the course of like there's warmth and it's like just like the water's just rising. So like it's like that with the tree or like plants, in that like it's really like the water in the earth moving through the tree, rising with the heat of the sun and rising up, which I'd never thought about, like the growth of the tree being fueled by evaporation in that way. which is like kind of cool. But the second thing I just wanted to say, I love your awesome wall of consciousness or wall of stuff or wall of information behind you. Because I have one too. I don't know if I've shown it before, but it's like all of the Kabbalah and tarot and stuff like that. So I'm like,
Yeah, I don't know
like
what you can see, but
it's a little blown out, but I can see the tree of life back there, and like that's pretty awesome.
yeah, for sure.
But no, yeah, I hear you. I love what you said. Like bringing light, bringing warmth into the cold. That's so good.
Thinking,
And we could even, I wonder if, I mean, you could kind of like correlate that the other way too and say like, what am I bringing into the summer, next summer? Maybe some cold, because it'll be really hot.
True.
You know, just thinking about that, yeah. But that's cool.
Yeah, I really clicked this morning with the idea of the phoenix and how the phoenix is like a metaphor for our seasons, really. Like you could see the phoenix in all its vibrance as like springtime, and you could see like the pile of ashes as winter, but then there's still embers in there there's still life. So yeah, you gotta just make it through winter, and then you're back into springtime.
Mm-hmm. I was telling we invited our neighbors over last night for dinner, and we were talking a little bit about tarot and the tarot cards and everything, and they saw the death card and got scared, and I went in a little micro tirade, not really, but a little description of like how death is one of the greatest cards in the tarot, because it's about like the breaking away of the old self, the falling away of the former in order to make way for something new, like a new aspect of yourself to be born. And my perspective actually changed a little bit when I was like researching and doing the writing on the death card, because it was like I used to think of it as like the death and rebirth together as one, but I realized that the death itself was really just the passage. Like the rebirth itself is the birth on the other side, and that's the next card, which we called resurrection. But the death itself is really just that, like it's like the character of death is like he's the one who meets you at the train station in between lives, you know, or in between states of being or states of spiritual experience. So yeah. I want to ask Joshua, Psionic Designs. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm just enjoying everybody talking. I had a couple ideas throughout there, but everyone just sounds fantastic, and they've got great ideas, so I just thought I'd let them go. Can you hear me?
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
There was something earlier you were saying about light and dark, and, you know, every time we get into these descriptions of world events and things like that, and, you know, like we talked about dark timelines or whatever at one point a while back, and it just made me think of, we're really just describing colors on a color palette. They're not really absolutely anything. They're just relative color from a perspective or rate of speed. Kind of like if you look at the horizon, you'll see blue, but if you were traveling at a certain rate of speed, that blue would shift to a red. I don't know. It's just a weird, funny trail of thought that I had earlier.
That's a very good thought, man. I think that's like a good way of putting it, because something that we experience as bad could be good for someone else, and vice versa. So you're definitely right with the colors, and that makes sense well, because nothing is just black and white. It's kind of a mixture. You have something red that could be like passionate, something green that could be loving, and all these sort of different colors, or like rays. You know, the 7 systems in an octave, all adding together. So I think that was a great point.
Well, and right there, following that, sorry, So you got those 7 colors, and it's like when Jordan was discussing the Kabbalah last call, I think, we were talking about the 3 pillars. And so I don't remember which one was the left or the right. That's the masculine and the feminine. The idea is that there's that polarity of masculine and feminine, or black and white, which is where we get the idea of light and dark, good and bad. But really, they're just where you're at on the progression up the scale, because you have to go through all the pathways to achieve the absolute.
Speaking a little bit to the idea that you're mentioning there, Joshua, about the, that, or actually, Anthony, you also sort of chime in on this as well. The whole idea of what's good for one thing may not be good for another thing, or what's not good for one thing may be good for another. So I practice energy medicine, and one of the things when offering a healing to anybody, and actually a really good reference for this would be any work done by Alberto Villoldo. He's awesome. His brand new book, One Spirit Medicine, is super awesome. His book, Shaman Healer Sage, is really good. And they talk about energy medicine and how one of the things that can happen when you're offering energy to somebody is, let's say, for instance, they have a cancer tumor, and you offer them the systemic energy in order to, enliven their whole system. Sometimes what happens, because there's actually something else in the luminous energy body, is that tumor actually expedites. You've just given them your pure love, and you've just given them pure energy to work with, but because you didn't offer it from the right perspective, even though it might be feeling really nice maybe down the back of the head, or your body starts to tingle a little, that tumor grows exponentially. And it can actually have a detrimental effect to the body. So even though you're offering this energy, and you've done some of the work that you're typically doing in that world, it can have a detrimental effect on the systemic wellness of the body. So it's one size doesn't fit all in this community, as much as we would like to think so. There's another story that he tells in his book, actually, that talks about how a young woman went to a well-intentioned psychic and received a reading on her, who she wanted to know what was up with her newly dead daughter. Her daughter had just passed away. It was a tragic accident, and the psychic, meaning well, said, well, everything's okay. Your daughter's with you, and she's doing fine. She will always be with you. And then a few days later, she noticed that she started having major depressive bouts of depression, and her body started going into certain sort of states of sickness, and she started really having problems sleeping, a lot of anxiety. And so she happened to stumble across Dr. Villoldo, and he has the ability, as much as the shamans do, to be able to see into the luminous energy body. And he saw that she actually had this sort of shadow presence with her. And what had happened when that offer of kind words, oh, don't worry, your daughter's with you and she's just fine, was offered by the psychic, what happened is that the woman opened up a space in her luminous energy body that her daughter was still earthbound, and attached itself to her mother because she was afraid. And that energy that was attached, that attachment, ended up having all sorts of problems and creating all sorts of contextual problems, because spirit and our body and the two luminous fields coming together, one being shadow needing to go into its own contextual reality, but being stuck, that's a big issue. And so it ended up creating a contextual problem for this woman, even though the psychic said, hey, meaning well, like just trying to offer condolences and offer something of truth to this woman, as much as it may not have been truth. Alberto noticed right away, because he's trained as a shamanic seer, that the spirit of her daughter was with her. He was able to do ceremony. He was able to bring in spirit and help the young girl transition properly. Within a couple of days, the woman was sleeping better again, and she actually felt immediately better. Her body, her consciousness felt better. Her body felt better. And, and the question is, how often does this happen? How many of us are walking around, we don't realize it, but we have some attachment from a friend or a family or some spirit that we, didn't even realize we were in some sort of altered state of consciousness, or someone had mentioned something, we opened up a place within us, and then a few days later we just feel off and we can't figure out why. This woman's case was obviously fairly intense because it was her daughter, and that bond between mother-daughter is likely one of the strongest bonds in the universe. So, that's, or at least in a principle sense, in principle. So anyway, I just wanted to share that, like the whole idea of not everything that it seems to be good is necessarily good unilaterally across all vectors. So I like that a lot.
It really speaks to the power of words and communication. There was a quote that I actually tweeted that I just pulled up based on what you were saying, because it goes, "My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go." And it like speaks to this idea that it's really, the words are just words unless there's a meaning and an intention behind it. And what you're describing, interestingly, there's really two things that you're describing. First is the permission. Like if you're going to do, like this is a common thing in Reiki, like if before you can even perform Reiki on anybody, you really have to have permission from them or their higher selves that you can actually move these energies around, or else that body will reject it. And I think that's related also to the tumor, is that if you're giving love but it's not being received by that individual soul, then it'll just go straight to fueling whatever cancerous or otherwise bad energy that's within your body of consciousness. And the second is that intention, is that when you're giving, like as you were saying, like the psychic was meaning well, being like, oh no, don't worry or whatever, but in doing so, like that energy was really just like there kind of like, I'm trying to visualize it almost as like a patting down of dough or something, but like just like pushing it down into the person, and then it got stuck there within her, as opposed to maybe what she needed to hear was something else and it coming out and being released. And so that's very interesting. We have to be very, very mindful of not just the words we use, but where the intention and the fuel of those words come from, because everything that you experience, and this is just, I'm like kind of drawing on some stuff I was reading this week, but like everything that we experience is nothing more than a reflection of what's in your heart and what's in your soul. And then that amplified across all of humanity, the human soul, the human collective. But that's good news, because that also gives us a clear indication of how we can affect change, is not by doing anything necessarily physically. That will come as a result of doing that work in here first.
Yeah, I love that you say that. And interestingly enough, like you're somebody who appreciates comparative religion and comparative philosophy and comparative science, and you've done a lot of work in this trajectory already that you present to the world through many of your videos, your blog, your social, everything. So it's something that is well respected by the community. And one of the things that I've noticed in going back to some of those ancient doctrines and wisdom teachings, one of them is the power of life and death is in the tongue. You can go back to Genesis and talk about, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's some pretty powerful stuff. God spoke on the first day, God spoke on the second day, etc. Going back into these biblical geneses, right? Like these are things that we need to reference, although they are in a sense metaphorical, but they're characteristic of the resonance of sound, or of the resonance of vibration. On the first day there was light, but wait a second, on the first day there was light, but then on the fourth day there was a sun and an earth. So there was light that precluded things like suns and earths. To speak to what you were talking about in your meditation to begin this whole context, was that at the center of the earth on another level is just pure light, this radiant ball of light. Well, this is God's light. Let's connect to that, the light that gives all things allness, period, as creation is set up. So I find that really quite fascinating that, it really is, and to speak of seasons, let's tie this into, today's topic, the season of going from understanding, not understanding the power of your own being to understanding the power of your own being. That's like the great season, the great shift, the great summer, in a way. You go from the winter of unconsciousness to the summer of consciousness. And it's one season over the course of your entire platform. Because once you become aware, it's very hard to become not aware anymore. Once you have seen, it's very hard to unseen. Once you have learned, it's very hard to unlearn. Once you've realized, it's very hard to unrealize, unless there's some sort of catastrophic event or some kind of an accident or something. It's very difficult to unlearn those trajectories. So very, very, very fascinating. The whole idea of going from not awareness to awareness, and going from using words unconsciously, as you mentioned in your quote, to consciously, as we mention in so much of scripture and so much of wisdom teachings and so much of philosophy, and so much of science even. Hence the reason why, language can be even weaponized, to speak of some of the catastrophic stuff that's going on. Language is weaponized every day. If you turn on the television, language is weaponized on a daily basis. The way that you focus your energy is the way that you're going to start to manifest. The very first principle of providence that I outline in the upcoming book is paradigm. And there's a reason for that. Paradigm is so important because it's the way you frame your reality entirely. The way you wake up in the morning and decide to speak about yourself, to speak about your reality, to muse upon your world, is exactly how you're going to act in the world, emote in the world, project in the world. So that word framework, that initial principle, the paradigm that you view your life through, your belief systems, the way that you interact, the very fact that we put on pants, okay, is a revelation of paradigm and the way that we frame our reality. So very interesting that you would bring that up, Jordan. I like that a lot.
There's so much I want to speak to with that, but I want to give an opportunity in case anybody else wants to jump in. Go with 3, 2, 1. Okay. First, on the topic of the Bible and the Word was with God and the Word was God. This is one of the and you just said yourself, that you like. It's like the comparative religion and philosophy and psychology and science and all of this stuff together, because it's one of the reasons I love the Hermetica and Hermeticism, because in one of the very beginning passages in one of the writings attributed to Hermes, it describes that in another way that's really like, you're kind of using it and saying like it's sort of metaphorical, but it's really not, because the Hermetica actually like directly goes, look, the mind of God creates through the word of God the exact same way that your mind turns thoughts into speech. And like that, it's like as above, so below, right? So like it takes it out of metaphorical land, and you can really just look at it from that perspective of this great infinite formless God, spirit, soul, source, whatever we want to call it, but it creates through vibration, exactly as you said. And the use of it, you brought up like that it was weaponized, or of course it can be, like the power of speech, the power of word. And that was very relative to me, because I've experienced that in a number of ways in my own life, both being on the receiving end of weaponized speech, but also being on the giving end and being aware, of like that duality. Like like we're all human, right? And we've all done things in our lives, and like that's just a thing. And like I've seen very clearly where I've cast a lot of hurt because I was hurt, and I used the power that I have of speech to cause pain, and seeing what that caused within others, that reflected within me, and now I'm hurting on the inside too, going, wow, okay. So like, and there's that learning process, and I want to say like that this is something that all of us really need to look at in our spiritual awakening, in our spiritual journey, because it's very easy to go, as Eddie said, just turn on the TV and you're seeing like, the news constantly using speech to convey messages that continue to propel like duality and dualism, and the awareness of, you know, these guys are bad and I'm good, because everybody thinks they're the good guy. That's what there's this one woman from the CIA who quit, and then she like made a testimonial, and she's like, one of the biggest things that I learned is everybody thinks they're the good guy. It does not matter who you are, what you do in the world, you always think you're the good guy. And from that perspective, you can actually look then and see, if everybody thinks they're the good guy, maybe we're not all so different after all. We're all actually one, and we just need to find out how we all shall harmoniously fit together. And of course, the way that one of the biggest ways that we do that at all is through communication and through speech, because without that tool, without that bridge, without our ability to communicate with each other, nothing would get built, nothing would get created, nothing would happen. There wouldn't be anything for, I mean, we'd be like, I don't even know where we would be as a species, because you think of everything we've ever created all came about because we had the idea, and then we shared it with each other, and then we acted upon that sharing and upon that collective, you know, knowing, awareness that came from the communication, which means there's a shared consciousness between us. Which actually, just final thought on this thing was that when I was, as part of the Kabbalah, and I was just learning about, you know, the Hebrew language and everything, one of the things that I read this week, which was amazing, was that the word for like listening and communication in ancient Hebrew, it was both attributed to the eyes and the ears. So they didn't have like, I see you and I hear you. They just had like, I receive you, which was this like singular thing. And so it was like so much more in tune with the awareness of like, there's constantly energy that's going back and forth between us, whether we're in this call or someone's watching this, there is an energy that's going back and forth that we're giving and receiving, and every time you can isolate. Now, this is I guess part of the value and part of the constrictions of the human language, or the English language, is that we've isolated, like there's, you know, like this eye and then this eye and then the ears, and then but really it's like there is this sort of unified body of communication that's being given and received. And I think that there's more to that than just, you know, like, even though, like, you know, we're talking about the word and the translation into speech, right? It's where that comes from and what's coming through. It's also the look through your eyes, like the clarity of the idea that's coming through. So I'm trying to like look at the camera now, but there's just so much information coming through at once. We really have to practice not just listening selectively, but to the bigger picture, because when someone does use speech as a weapon, you know, you can look at a bigger picture and see, why did they say that? Why did they project that onto me? Because it's obviously coming. Or why did I do that? Because it's coming from something inside of you that's out of balance, and that's looking for balance. And in the creation of those words and the physical representation and seeing how the other person reacted to that, you can take that and like, that's the reflection, like that's the mirror. That's like looking in the mirror and going, oh, I'm seeing, you know, that I have like this bump on my nose or something, and like that was caused from someone hitting me because of the whatever, I don't know. But like using that as a reaction to, or a reflection of going, I'm seeing that only happened because of what came from in here first.
I'd like to build on that.
Please, thank you. Yeah,
just this idea of the power of the word and communication being essential, right? It's interesting when you look at the word communication, in the middle there's unify, unity. So when you communicate, you are essentially sharing space and becoming one with one another, right? And if you think about like where we are today, there's so much deception, both verbally and like visually. I mean, communication isn't just verbal, it's also the symbols that we see, and all this, there's some symbols everywhere that sort of direct our minds. But if we're thinking, if I could tie this into season aspects, I think that we're just in a season of like non-communication. Like Dr. Greer talks about the lost century. how for the past 100 years we've like basically have lost progression because we have not communicated with, like, we've been basically keeping secrets, lying, deceiving. So yeah, that's a really good point. Just the power of the word and the power of truth and communication, for sure.
I wanted to say something as well. Maybe you guys can help me tie it back up because it probably won't. But in terms of talking about creation of ideas and, you know, all the importance of the word, but it's also like the importance of love as well. The other day, I was just like strolling through San Francisco, and San Francisco can get a little bit crazy sometimes. And there was a festival going on, and you know, I came to the realization that, you know, if I am one with unity and I am with everyone and we're all connected through this like web, then that means that I have, in one way or another, a part of me has met everyone, you know, and is connected to everyone. That means that I have loved everyone one way or another, whether everyone was my child or a father or a loved one or a friend. Like, if we shift our perspective into people, like, we have literally loved each other at one point or another. We have created each other, and we're so beautiful in that way. And I just wanted to say that.
Can I add to that a little bit, Karen? Because that's a really beautiful thought and a beautiful realization in and of itself. What if it's so simple that it's the idea of going back to principle again? One of the things that makes everything so easy to connect with people by is the idea that, say, for instance, virtue. Virtue is inherent in all of us. Like, we are not acting peacefully. We literally are peace. We're not acting loving. We literally are love, manifest. So if we go back to these core virtues, then the very fact that you are love and that I am love means that we love each other. You know, it's one of those interesting platforms that just allows it to be. It's not as if we have to get into the hyper like dimensional stuff of like, I've lived every life and every possibility and every vector has been mine, and I've known you and we've all known each other and we're all just this big loving bubble of joy. Although I'm sure that is true to a large degree if you get into like some of Bert Goldman's work and things like that on all the, you know, multiple realities and the constant parallel vectors that we can associate with. Cut simple, I love that you mentioned that, because if we go back to principle, right now in this life, we actually love everybody. We actually are peaceful with everybody because we are those things. Those serve the core of our very being. So when you're built on peace, then if you allow yourself to allow that through, because allowing, as Jordan was speaking about earlier, we need permission. But if we give ourselves permission to allow that peace to flow through us, then you'll recognize it in the other individual because it's there already. It's those that want to walk around blinded to that perceptual fact that end up causing chaos and war and all these other things because they're not seeing the pure fact that love is inherent in our being. It's what we're built on. It's going back to the Essenes, it's one of the angels of the Essenes that build the very fabric of what you are, that you come into communion with through prayer. So that introspective analysis is actually really quite profound. Jordan's learning right now. Look, he's yawning. This is great. I love it. That's the essential sign of the learner. It's great. I love it so much. It's like you're pulling in spirit. It's great. So love that you brought that up here, and that is profound. Beautiful, beautiful thought.
I don't really have a response.
What a wonderful day. I just wanted to like acknowledge, I guess, really just the free flow of this conversation and where it's really gone. And It's been really fun.
I was wondering if you guys want to know more about the Word of God based on this analysis, if I can just read it to you guys.
But it wouldn't be a spirit side chat if Nicholas didn't jump in with some crazy random fact of the day. So go for it, man.
Yeah.
Take the mic.
So on the Word of God, as an introduction to this gospel, the chapter begins, in eternity past with God, who had divinity but not humanity. It then passes through his creation of all things, his incarnation, becoming the Lamb who takes away the sin of the world, and his being the Spirit who causes the believers to be transformed into living stones for his building, and continues all the way to eternity future, in which the Son of Man, who has both divinity and humanity, is the center for the communication between heaven and earth, and for the union of God and man in eternity. After this, chapter 2 shows that the principle of the triune God as life is to change death into life, and that the purpose of life is to build a house, the temple of God. In chapters 3 through 11, 9 cases are given to illustrate how God as life meets the needs of different kinds of people. As a result, in the beginning of chapter 12, a miniature of the church is produced. From 12:12 to the end of chapter 17, an explanation is given concerning how the church is produced through the multiplication and increase of the incarnated God-man by means of his death and resurrection. Chapters 18 through 20 show the accomplishing of the multiplication and increase, which causes him to have many brothers and enables him to enter them into their life and everything, that they may be constituted his body as his increase in expression. And finally, chapter 21 reveals that he will be with them in an invisible way until his coming back.
As you were describing it, I heard the way that it was received in my head, I guess was sort of translated into like Kabbalese. Either way, I wanted to like relate this then to like this picture here, because you're basically describing like, well, let me get there we go. So here you have like the Word of God happening at the top, right? The emanation of vibration, and all of these vibrations like coming down, manifesting into a physical world, where then like you're talking about like the church and the accumulation of like when this is continually received over and over down in this world, in the physical realm, it builds up and it grows in the hearts of people, this connection to spirit, and it starts to build back up. And then as it's building back up, it's like returning to God, returning to Christ through the center, the big heart center right here in the middle. And what book again was that you were just reading? That was the whole
John, the Gospel of John.
Gospel of John. Brilliant. It makes sense too, because you've got like, the bottom realm is kingdom, the one above it, foundation, glory.
So in the Bible, the gospel, there's 4 gospels. And the question is, why is there 4 gospels? There's 4 gospels because the 4 gospels show 4 different aspects of Christ. The first gospel, the Gospel of Matthew, shows Christ as the king savior. The second gospel, Mark, shows Christ as a slave savior who came not to be served but to serve others. And then the Gospel of Luke shows Christ as a proper man, the only sinless man that ever lived. And then the Gospel of John shows Christ as the Word of God, also the Son of God, and God himself. So the 4 aspects is the king, the slave, the man, and God.
That's very interesting. That very much relates as well, if you saw the Kabbalah episode about Tiferet, of being observed from different perspectives as a king, a child, and sort of this dying and resurrecting God in the center. What's interesting, I want to like just kind of as the topics on this conversation, one of the things that I've researched and read about sort of the formation and creation of the Gospels is that if you actually look at the timeline about when these were created, the first Gospel, which was it Mark? I think it might have been Mark.
Matthew.
Was it or was it John? Well, no, I mean not the order in the Bible, but the first one that was actually created was actually created from an accumulation of texts that existed in sort of this pre-Christian Gnostic period, where there was tons of different like texts attributed to Jesus floating around, and they were assimilated into one gospel, which then developed 2 more after it, and then like 100 years later, Luke was the final one to actually be created. And when you look at like the all of the texts that exist and you carbon date them and whatnot, you can see like this, like one was written in like, 70 AD was the first one, when it was actually put together. And then it was roughly 110 AD, that the next two, I think, were Matthew and Mark, or maybe Matthew and John, depending. Yeah, Luke was the last one though, because it's interesting too to watch like the progression is like in the first one, it's just fragments of like phrases that Jesus said, and then as the Gospels progress, by Luke, Jesus is speaking in full fluent Greek, and like it's taken out of the context of passages or these phrases or these words, kind of like if you read the Gospel of Thomas, which was recently unearthed over the last 100 years in the Gnostic texts and whatnot. It's just passages. It's just like a short sentence or two per line, and they're just remarkably profound. But that's the basis of the original Gospels. But it was later adapted and turned into a much more elaborate story by the progression of the creation of these Gospels, which were not ever put together until approximately at least 40 years after the supposed time when Jesus would have been killed, if we're going by the standard that he was born at 0 and died at 30, or 33 or what have you. But it's all very interesting. I also just really wanted to quickly say welcome to Kevin. He just jumped in, and he is actually a comic book producer as well as a video game developer who jumped in yesterday and was in our private chat, and we read his comic. It's awesome. It's great to have you here, man. Welcome. Oh, you're muted if you are trying to say anything.
There we go. Oh,
hey, there we go.
Yep. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for the invite to this, and I've already very much enjoyed talking to you in chat, and thanks for the good words about the comic too.
Likewise.
Can you share maybe a little bit about that, Kevin? It's a really cool comic that you have. Like, why not use this as an opportunity to speak about the consciousness that you've seeded within your work? Because I really like it.
Thank you so much.
I agree.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the main character of the comic is living in corporate America, and he and his wife are trying to live the American dream. And it's very important to them to climb the corporate ladder and make all the money and go on vacations and have a big house and all that good stuff. So we establish right away that they're a good team. And then shortly thereafter, he has a supernatural event occur where now he only help others and not make money necessarily for himself. So immediately he's welcomed back into this world very roughly and tries to help lots of people. But of course, everything kind of goes wrong for him at the same time, because now he can't do his job. His wife is confused by his strange behavior, and so on and so forth. And the one other little tidbit I think makes it really interesting is that every time he helps someone, then they get it too. So we get to see this thing spread, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, thanks for that overview.
Sorry, take it away.
No, not at all. I was just saying, like, what I really love about it is that, the whole idea of giving from the heart, or giving from this pure light of consciousness, it seeds that within the other individual just by resonance alone. That's actually a real thing that happens every day, all day, when people offer from the heart their gift or their activity or their truth or their what have you. It spreads into the heart of another and into the mind of another in a way that's really quite profound. So that you're illustrating that in a way that actually brings out some of the social dialogue and the schisms that are in our mentality about what you have to do and how you have to do it, and especially in the corporate world. It's interesting to see how you're framing this as a storyboard that people can almost reflect on, or will reflect on in their own lives and their everyday jobs. Actually, it's funny because in the chat, Joshua, chimed in and says, it's interesting how, that's kind of similar to the way I'm flailing at work. It's or have in certain ways. So it's interesting to see that you're already changing the landscape just by sharing those simple thoughts. So I wanted to kind of give you a praise on that.
Well, thank you so much. And I really do feel like that what's going on in the story, of course, 99% of the population should identify with the two characters at the very beginning, because I know, this capitalist society is full of capitalists. So their perspective, of course, is going to be, yes, these guys are going to make money. They're going to rule the world. This is going to be great. And then it all changes. So I'm really hoping to have an opportunity for some people that think of themselves as doing the right thing by making money for themselves, question that a little bit and say, wait a minute, maybe I'm putting so much effort and so much energy into this. And what am I doing it for? Just for myself, just for my family. Why can't we treat everyone in the world like they're our family? Because everyone needs help and everyone needs love.
Yeah, it's like the song at the end of the Lego Batman movie. Because friends are family. No, really, it's an amazing movie. Go and watch it. But yeah, no, I really love your comic book, and I want to let's just give it a plug, and maybe we'll put it in the description of this video too for people. But the comic is called Righteous, right? But it's listed as Righteous Comic on.
Yep.
And where would people be able to find it? On what website?
Well, I have it on 4 of the webcomic websites. I also have it on Facebook and Tumblr, trying to get it out there as much as possible. One of the sites that I really like a lot is called bcomics.com, and you'll be able to find it easily on there. What's cool about bcomics is I kind of get to animate the frames a little bit. So, they slide in or they fade in or that sort of thing. So it gives it a little bit more of a production value. So I like that one quite a bit.
That's awesome. I want to check that out, actually. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool site.
I read it all the way through, but now I'm going to go read it all the way through again just to see those effects.
All right, thanks.
Awesome. Well, guys, this has been a wonderful call this time. Thank you all for coming. We've passed our hour mark. I mean, we could keep going if you guys want to, but I just kind of had that feeling. It's a good point. But yeah, I just want to say thank you all again for coming and participating and bringing that love, shining it through to the world. For everybody who's watching, thank you as well for tuning in and for checking out and listening and receiving and being a resonant body of consciousness in your own world, because that's what makes it all happen. That's what makes this change real, is when we embody it.
I have one more question after Nicholas.
What causes the seasons? I don't know.
Cycles.
Season Earth. I'm tilting towards the sun and the different weather. Got an electromagnetic field around the Earth, which will slowly bring the ionosphere around, and that's what generates electricity. We get like clouds, we get precipitation, all these sorts of things add together to make seasons.
There's we can, if you really are interested, you could actually look up seasons on Wikipedia, Nicholas, and you can read the very scientific explanation of, the sun and the earth orbiting around the sun, the spiraling, the circling, the farther away in the orbits, and how the earth kind of wobbles, and in doing so, one side gets warmer and one side gets colder, and then reverses and all that. Or you can just look at it like a big wheel. And then just kind of going around in this sort of continual progression, and then that wheel kind of spiraling because it's also moving as a whole. So there's a number of ways you can look at it, but
you could also search for Wheel of the Year if you want to learn more about that as well.
Cool.
But Kevin, I had a really interesting synchronicity. I read the whole comic. I was really loving it. I was in a really good space, but I was like, I need to just take a break from everything spiritual for a minute, and I'm going to veg out for a little while last night. And so I picked this sitcom at random called Kevin Probably Saves the World. And I want to know, did you inspire this show? Because it's similar to the comic in a few elements. And it's named Kevin Probably Saves the World. So, I mean, maybe weird synchronicity there, but maybe you should check it out.
Yeah, I've never even heard of that. So I'll have to look that up. Maybe I did. but I've been working on the comic for about a year, and I don't think I have the audience yet to inspire a show.
It's just a matter of time, though, right?
Absolutely. I hope so.
You like Batman more or Superman more?
What was that?
Do you like Batman more or Superman more or Spider-Man more?
Spider-Man was always my hero as a kid. Definitely.
Me too, actually.
Yeah. I think he was the most innocent and the one you cared about the most. You wanted to see successful, right?
Yeah.
Unless you had tragedy in your life, then you were probably more of a Batman fan. But just as a nerdy kid myself, I identified with Peter Parker.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, guys. Thank you again so much for being here, joining in, participating, loving, laughing, learning, sharing, shining.
I see you all, guys.
Great.
Take care.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.